What's up, guys? Welcome to a new series on the channel, something that I'm really excited for. The idea behind this series is that I'm going to be talking a little bit about some of the more off-screen elements of Pokemon, so stuff like, today we're talking about hacks, we can talk about like timer, that's something I'm really excited for, just like a bunch of different stuff that goes into Pokemon that is kind of behind the scenes. If you're not really interested in becoming better at VGC, like if you just like watching the videos because they're fun, and like you like watching, but you're not like super serious about improving, like this probably isn't the series for you, and like that's totally cool, but yeah, out of all the things I produce, I think this is going to be like one of my more serious because yeah, I don't know. I think it's something like I'm going to be talking about stuff I think that's harder to physically see, and so I think there's going to be more value in that. So yeah, with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and get started. So today we're going to be talking about hacks, dealing with hacks and playing around it, which is something that I think is really relevant always in Pokemon because of the way that the game is played, but especially this year. So let's just go ahead and get into it. First of all, like I think it's important to define what hacks is. So hacks is a catch-all term used to describe the different elements of luck that are involved when you play Pokemon. And it normally carries a negative connotation, such as in the phrase, like, I got hacked out. Yes, it's prevalent in Pokemon especially versus like other games because of the fact that there's so many moves that carry an element of luck. So you have things like you can see here, critical hits, freezes, sleep turns, and accuracy are all big ones. And these all these things like accuracy, critical hits are like some of the most common. Like they all are pretty common in Pokemon. Like how many times have you heard like, oh, like I should have won, but I missed a Precipice Blaze in the last turn, or I missed 10 Heat Waves, I missed 10 Heat Waves, or, I got crit through minus 8, stuff like that. So, yeah, that's what hacks is. So, the current mindset when it comes to hacks is something that is pretty prevalent, I think. It's so, like, basically you go to a tournament and you say, oh, like, how'd you do last round? And if they say, if the person you're talking to says, oh, I lost, like, you say, oh, what happened? And they say, often, I would postulate maybe more often than not, you're going to hear, I got hacked out. And with that in mind, like how many times have you heard that? And think about how many times you've actually said that too. This is something that I've noticed a lot in the community. It's been a growing trend. Maybe as the community grew, it's been more common. I don't really know exactly, but yeah, definitely like this idea of that you should have won, but something out of your control happened and caused you to lose is like pretty common at the moment. But here's the problem with that. This thought process is pretty limiting to your growth because like the subtext behind I got hacked out is basically you saying I should have won, but due to something that I totally couldn't control, like I ended up losing, and that's not really healthy because, like basically like there's different ways to look at Pokemon, but if you're trying to actually improve and if you're trying to actually get better, like kind of saying like the thought like if you're saying I should have won, but something that I couldn't control happened, that doesn't push you to get better, right? It's like saying I don't know, it's like oh like I don't know, it's not healthy and it doesn't help you to grow. So something that I think is really important to talk about. Like, so you can say, okay, basically, like, you're just, okay, Wolf, like, you can say it's not healthy to blame hacks when you lose, right? But, like, I did lose because of hacks. Or, like, it's not healthy to blame hacks because like, when you lose, but, maybe Pokemon is a game so determined by luck that you can't really control it. And so I'm going to talk about Ray here. Ray Rizzo is, for those of you who don't know, Ray's the 3-time world champion, and he is probably the most important player to look at when you're talking about this subject because basically the thing about the fact that Ray has done so well, the fact that Ray won Worlds 3 times, is it kind of like gives really strong evidence that it is possible, Like the odds of Ray winning Worlds 3 times in a row, and like not getting any bad luck is so small. Like it's not really possible, Like statistically speaking, it shouldn't be possible. And so you have to say, okay, like Ray won Worlds 3 times in a row, right? So he must have been doing something different than all the other players, right? Like he was so consistent, like he must have been doing something that allowed him to do that. And so if you accept that theory, then the question is not like it's no longer is it possible? It's how did he do it, right? So what can you actually do about it? This is all just my thoughts, so take it with a grain of salt. But like from my observations, hacks arises from 2 primary sources: from your actual team, like the composition of your team, and from the way you play it. And playing is the easier option to deal with by far because you can play to 100% win conditions, and you can kind of like when you're playing, you kind of know the odds that you're up against, right? You're like, okay, like the way, like, what are the possible bad things that can go wrong this turn, right? I could miss my Draco Meteor. I could miss my Precipice Blades. I could get crit. I could get burnt. I could get frozen. Like, those are all, like, the hacks, the luck elements, the elements of chance that are involved per turn. You can see them, so they're easier to deal with. And so when you're looking at how to balance your actual playing, you can kind of look at situations where you're like, okay, like, I win, like this example. I win as long as I hit Precipice Blades here. but that's an 85% chance like to win the game, which like, you know, like if you do that every single time, you're going to lose some of those games on misses. And so you have to say, is there any way that I can rearrange this situation, that I can play the game a little longer, like that I can put myself into a position where I only need to hit fire punch, you know, where I only have to hit a 100% accurate move, then I know I'm faster. So like not taking unnecessary risks is a big thing there. But the team is actually a lot harder. And so this is something I really like. I'm excited to talk about. It's called the ENFUEGO theory. ENFUEGO is a player who was really, really one of the most dominant American players back in 2010 through 2012. He hasn't done well, especially recently, but he actually just got second at the regionals where he had to leave to catch his flight. He probably would have beaten me in the finals in Florida. And he also just won a midseason showdown. So he's kind of like out of the ashes. And he's one of the most phenomenal players I've ever met. And he had this theory that he came up with when I was but a wee aspiring trainer. And he said, Wolf, like, let me tell you the ENFUEGO theory. You can't get haxed out if your opponent doesn't make any moves. And, you know, I laughed and I said, that's funny. But I thought about it more, and it's silly, but it's actually very true. And so basically what he's saying is, like, if your opponent never gets to launch an attack, he can't crit you, he can't burn you, he can't flinch you, he can't freeze you. Like, you know, like, you can miss your attacks, but, like, that's just about it. And so some of the applications of this is, like, how do you prevent your opponent from making moves, right? If you want to balance like hacks, if you want to balance luck, how do you stop your opponent from making moves? So this is like part of why speed and speed control is so important in the metagame, because especially in VGC 16, like speed control has always been important, right? Like it's always been something that you had to keep in mind. But now in VGC 16, where you have Pokemon that hit so hard, when you're looking at especially Pokemon with really strong spread moves, Groudon and Kyogre, the ability for those guys to launch a full power Eruption, Precipice, Blazing Gravity, or Water Spout or Origin Pulse even is so important, because the amount of damage it dishes out, the ability to get KOs is so large. I also want to talk a little bit about putting your opponent on the back foot, because switching, like the way that this is written, it makes it seem as if I think switching is like bad, and I definitely don't, because I think switching is really important. But every time you switch, you have to think about the fact that you could, in theory, be letting your opponent launch up to 2 attacks, and they could be like they could be hitting 4 targets where they launch 2 spread moves. That's not likely, but like every time you switch, you're passing up a turn where you could be attacking, and in return you're getting a turn where you should be getting attacked. So that just like it's something to be aware of. Like the more you switch, the more attacks you're going to take to some extent. As long as like if you switch in something and then you KO both your mons, like it's not quite the same. But yeah, like you need like being a step ahead, being the one who kind of controls the real importance here is board position, right? Being in control of the game, controlling the momentum, and like just like putting yourself into a situation where you control the flow of the game, so that your opponent is like on the back foot, so that they can't exert as much offensive pressure, and therefore like you take less attacks, and if you take less attacks, you're less likely to hacks. This is also like really important in terms of disruption moves, the ENFUEGO theory, because if your opponent doesn't make any moves, the way that I initially interpreted that is like, okay, like if you KO them before they KO you, right? If you KO them before they can attack. But it also applies to moves like especially Thunderwave Paralysis and Confusion. Those status conditions, like if you confuse your opponent, if you flinch your opponent, if you paralyze your opponent and they can't move, like your odds are suddenly so much better at being able to do damage and then not being able to. So that's the ENFUEGO theory, and I think it's really important in mitigating hacks. So this is also something I want to talk about. I'm known for a defensive style sometimes. Like I can vary pretty widely, but I have in the past used teams that are extremely defensive, and I think this is something that's important to talk about, because a defensive team in theory appeals a lot to someone like me, because you slow down the pace of the game. It's less like one turn decides the game. It's a lot less dependent on lead matchups. So you kind of like the theory behind defensive playing is you slow your opponent down, you make them play the game your way, and then you like slowly whittle them down, and then you end up winning. And there's definitely a really good way to play defensively, but you have to be aware that you don't take it too far. So in 2013, I used a team which I believe had 20 EVs total in both attack and special attack combined, and 2013 was by far my worst year at Worlds. So basically, like if you don't exert any offensive pressure, you're putting yourself into a situation where you have where your opponent has the freedom to attack you nonstop, to attack relentlessly, and like statistically, sooner or later, you're going to get some like bad luck. You're going to get hacks. But it's not really like, I don't know. I don't really like to use the term hacks there, because like if you have a 1 in 16 chance of getting crit and you get attacked, like it's not really possible, but like 32 times and you get crit once, you're kind of asking for it. I don't know. So yeah, like basically there's not a defensive team is solid, but you need to find a way to actually exert pressure as well, because otherwise you're just going to get stuck in a situation where you continually take attacks, you continually are taking damage, and you're not actually exerting anything at all. So yeah, think about this one. How many times does a -4 Kangaskhan need to attack before it crits? Because you can leave that -4 Kangaskhan there for as long as you like, and you're like, oh, it's not doing any damage, but like sooner or later it's going to crit, especially because it hits twice. So yeah, just think about that. So team building. Now we're finally into team building. So for me personally, when I team build, I think a lot about safety. I think a lot about what do I need to do to guarantee win condition. So I always take safety, like guaranteed. I like 100% moves. I like them a lot. At Florida Regionals, I ran Scald over Origin Pulse, and it was no question for me. I was like, I'm not losing a game because I double miss Origin Pulse. So, but the trade-off for that is you often lose, like the moves with lower accuracy often have some benefit. Oftentimes it's power. So like Origin Pulse is a lot stronger than Scald, and so like basically like some people feel that in best of 3 situations you're better, you can afford to use lower accuracy moves, and that's something I'm not entirely sold on. It definitely is true. Like the theory is like you get more shots at it, like you get like more chances to play. So like the stronger moves, if they hit 85% of the time, like they're gonna balance out eventually, and you can interpret that. You can try that out if you want. I am personally, I don't like the risk elements, so I choose safety over damage personally. But in best of 3 situations, it's definitely a personal choice, but still think about it. Like, still consider the fact that you should be losing 15% you should be missing 15% of your attacks, and if you counter that move to win games, I don't know, it's pretty risky. Speed. Speed is really, really important. It's always been important. Speed control it allows you to maintain the upper hand. Attacking first, putting on pressure on your opponents, especially in VGC 16 where speed control is huge. It's very important. If you've ever had a game where you had Tailwind up and Kyogre and they didn't have a way to reset their weather, it's just it's pretty brutal. This is also why priority moves are really important, partially to pick off weakened threats, but also because moving first just gives you such a big advantage if you can KO the opponent. Because if you can KO the opponent first before they move, you suddenly aren't taking one more attack. And also I've talked a little bit about this before. Board control, it's similar to speed control because it's a lot of it is about the flow of the game, right? I don't know, moves like Fake Out, Status Conditions, support moves like Wide Guard and Quick Guard and Follow Me. Those are all really, really strong moves because they allow you again to control the board, right? If your opponent, your opponent's Kyogre has Water Spout, Origin Pulse, Ice Beam, Protect, and you have a Wide Guard, Aegislash, you pretty much shut them down. And now all of a sudden that Kyogre, which is such a huge threat, can only use Ice moves, single target Ice moves against, as long as you keep clicking Wide Guard, which is pretty valuable. Spread moves are also in board control just because they exert more pressure, and it's if you hit 2 targets, you have double the chance to crit, you have double the chance to flinch if you're using Rock Slide. I don't know, it's all about board control in some respects. And so it's not all this simple. Something I really want to talk about is dealing with top threats. And the thing in VGC 16 that's the biggest threat right now is Smeargle. So Smeargle's a Pokemon that has had a lot of discussion about around him. Basically, if you're not super familiar with the discussion, Dark Void is a move. It has 80% accuracy to hit both of the opponent's Pokemon, so 64% chance to hit both, if I'm doing that math correctly. And basically, people are they're not happy about it because Smeargle has a lot of elements associated with randomness, in its design. Because Dark Void has 80% accuracy, it already, by itself, isn't, super consistent. But then you have the fact that Dark Void induces Sleep, and Sleep is a 1 to 3 turn chance, and that's more rolls. And then you have, on top of everything else, Moody. So Moody is really threatening because a +2 speed boost and a +2 evasion boost or a +2 accuracy boost can really, really turn the game very quickly. And it's not that uncommon because Moody is, I don't know, it happens every turn. So the longer Smeargle sits around, the higher the chances it'll get a good boost. So people are not happy about Smeargle. And the other thing that you have to think about that I always think about is Thundurus. So Thundurus, if I could ban one Pokemon forever in VGC, I'd probably ban Thundurus. It's been the bane of my existence since it was introduced. Just because Thundurus is a really strong Pokemon. The combination of Thunderwave and Swagger is so threatening. Even just Thunderwave on its own is really, really threatening because it's a fast prankster Pokemon, and if it paralyzes one of your guys, you suddenly have a 1 in 4th chance every single turn to not attack. And that's just for someone who cares a lot about odds and is trying to be consistent, it's really, really frustrating to have a Thunderwave on your Pokemon. So Thundurus is an extremely, extremely powerful Pokemon. Thunderwave and Swagger are really dangerous. And it's also dangerous because Smeargle you can at least stop with Taunt, right? But Thundurus is Prankster, so you can't stop it with Taunt all the time, and it also runs Taunt of its own. So basically, the only way to stop basically, if you want to stop opposing Thundurus, this is more true in the past than it is this year, but like you'd have to run very fast Thundurus, and in other metagames that wasn't exactly ideal. You also have to keep an eye out for other disruptive Pokemon, like prankster Pokemon are really, really threatening. Not as much as Thundurus, but like Whimsicott, Meowstic, and Sableye are all prankster Pokemon, especially Whimsicott with its prankster Encore. I forgot Liepard, but Liepard is also on here. Just because they're prankster, they have a lot of options. Sableye can burn, Whimsicott can Encore, fake tears, or beat up. And Meowstic is just really it can use Confuse Ray. It can use Swagger, it can use Thunder Wave, it can use Safeguard, it can use Quick Guard. It has a lot of options. Fake Out. And it's kind of like Schrodinger's prankster Pokemon for these guys, because especially with Meowstic, because they have such a big move pool and because you can build them differently, it's like you have to assume they have every move until they're revealed all 4. So yeah, these are other things you have to be aware of. And fast Rock Slide Pokemon like Landorus T, mainly Landorus T, Scarf Landorus T, that was a big thing in 2015. Because like Rock Slide plus like very fast is just like the odds are against you if you get hit with a couple Rock Slides. And that's another thing that can win games. So basically, the reason I'm talking about all these guys, the reason why I think it's like worth mentioning is when you're thinking about like big threats to teams, you don't often think about Thundurus, right? If I say, okay, name the 5 biggest things you think are problematic in VGC 16, you'd probably say Smeargle. You would probably say like Groudon, Kyogre, Rayquaza, Xerneas, some other stuff, like some of the other restricted Pokemon, right? And so oftentimes like people don't often think about, is my team weak to Thundurus? Is my team, or like what they'll do is they'll slap they'll slap Taunt on a Pokemon or Lumberry on a Pokemon, and they'll say, okay, like I'm ready for Smeargle. And what you need to be aware of is like, even though these guys aren't like, they aren't 100% win conditions versus your teams, you should be aware that if you let them get going, if you have a team where if you have a game where Thundurus is allowed to just like paralyze 2 of your Pokemon, it's allowed to Swagger 2 of your Pokemon, you're going to have a really hard time. So if you want to be consistent in your team building, you have to make sure you have answers to this stuff. If you're having trouble with Smeargle, Smeargle's really unpopular right now. So I really recommend Crobat. Lum Crobat with Taunt and Tailwind and Super Fang. I mean, Taunt is a real thing. You can use whatever else you want. But it's really, really great at stopping Smeargle. So that's just a suggestion from me, but yeah, these are things to be aware of in your team building, because there are teams that are weak to Thundurus, and I'd say there's a lot more teams that are weak to Thundurus than people realize. So if you want to be consistent, you have to be able to deal with these things consistently. So yeah, in conclusion, speed is really important. Mentality is so important. Like if you actually want to get better, you have to try. You can't just say, I don't know, like oh man, I lost and I got hacked out, and like leave it at that, be self-critical. It's hard. It really is hard. Like if you truly believe that you should that is possible to win every single game, like if you believe that like luck doesn't play a big enough factor that it should stop you from winning, which is like what I believe, losing is like, it's tough. It's like, it's personal, because all of a sudden it's not like, oh, I got hacked out. It's like, I was not good enough. And that's like hard. Like that's hard to say to yourself. But it's my belief that in the end, like it's more beneficial to your personal growth. So that's my personal suggestion. I think your mentality is like so important when you're trying to get better. It's something that I work on. It's something that I think is like, I would say that probably the most important thing about whether or not you're good at Pokemon is your mentality, and whether or not you improve at Pokemon is your mentality. So think about that a little bit. When you lose, try not to blame hacks. Like look at the game critically and say, okay, yeah, like I got flinched, but like what could I have done better? And like, yes, you're gonna have games where you lose and you really do get like some really rotten luck, and it happens every once in a while, but it shouldn't be a thing every time you lose. It shouldn't be a thing most of the time you lose. It should be like very, very, very rare. Your team building is super important, right? Like you have to build teams that are consistent. You're like, don't use low accuracy moves if you can help it. Like if you can afford to use Scald, like use Scald. Like I don't know. You don't want to be losing games because you double miss Origin Pulse. You don't want to be losing games because you miss anything. You don't want to be losing games because you miss Draco Meteor. Like it sucks. You also like be aware of the threats like when team building. Don't just say, yeah, like I think I'm okay for Smeargle, or like, yeah, like versus Thundurus I have a ground type Pokemon. Like that's not the way the game is played, Like be objective, be critical, like try to like if you don't want to get hacked out, build a team that doesn't get hacked out and play it in a way that will prevent you from getting hacked out. And like with that in mind, playing is really important. Play to 100% win conditions when you can. You're going to get into situations where you have to go for that 90%. You're going to get into situations where you have to go for the double protect, like that 33% chance. But when you can, like don't count on 90% accuracy moves hitting, Don't count on the opponent's flamethrower not burning. Well, I mean, flamethrower is like something else, I guess, but like I don't know, don't count on like living the rock slide, like don't count on not getting crit, don't count on not getting flinched, don't count on not getting frozen to some extent, Just like be aware that these things can happen and have a game plan for if they do, and try to put yourself in a situation where it doesn't matter. Like they can freeze you, but you're up 4-1 and they've got like 2 minutes left on the clock. Just like keep that in mind because I think that's really important. And yeah, above all, like if you're serious about this game, if you actually want to get better, like try to become better. And it's not just like yeah, I want to get better and then like don't do anything, Like you actually have to make steps. You actually have to look at yourself critically and say, why am I losing, right? Like what has caused me to be losing these matches that I feel I should be winning, I don't know. Like basically, if you actually want to be better, you have to be critical of yourself. You have to look at yourself and you have to say, I am not doing something as well as I could be. How can I fix it? That's my perspective. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. If you have suggestions, I'm sorry that like the technology here is like a little lacking. I'm not super tech savvy, but if you enjoyed this, if you have questions, like please let me know. If you liked what you saw, if you want to see more of this, leave a like, leave a comment. If you have suggestions for the next one, I have a couple ideas for more of this series if you guys are interested. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, please make sure to subscribe and do the other stuff that you do, and